This is Mr. Bowman, and I want to show you an example of using the calculator to find extrema for a function. So the function we're going to try and find the extrema for, the maximum and minimum points, is f of x equals x cubed minus 5x plus 1. And let me pull up my calculator here. Okay, so you should be able to see my calculator on the screen now, and I'll point out that I've got it turned on. I know it's on because the cursor is blinking. And we want to graph this function. We want to graph this function that we're trying to find the extrema for, and to do that I need to hit the y equals button. So this will actually let you graph up to, it's either 8 or 10, I can't recall, functions at the same time. So what I want to do is I want to enter into the y1 location, I want to enter the function exactly as it's written. X cubed minus 5x plus 1. To get the variable, to get the x, you're going to want to hit the button here between alpha and stat. Now this has a bunch of other things listed on the button as well as x, and what that actually means is that there are other types of functions that we can deal with, and we'll deal with some of those over the course of this year. And whatever mode we have the calculator set in, that button will give me the appropriate variable. So since we're in the function mode, the xy function mode, that button gets me x. So I'll hit x cubed. Now there's not a nice button for cubed. The easiest way to do it is to hit the caret, exponent caret, and then the 3. So this, and then 3, will give me x cubed up here. If your calculator, like mine, puts the exponent up high, like where an exponent would be written in what's called the math type, you'll want to hit the right arrow to then get the cursor back down low. And then to finish it out, minus 5x. Make sure when you type the minus, you use the minus key and not the negative key. The calculator treats those differently, so you want to make sure you get the right one. And then I need plus 1. Once you've entered the function that you want to graph, simply hit the graph button and you will see that graph. Now as you run about, there's a way to turn on a grid on your calculator if you want it to look like mine. That might make it a little easier to estimate where the points are. Specifically, I found their y values. And if you need help doing that, I need you to let me know, okay? Also recall that if your calculator isn't showing the window that mine shows from negative 10 to 10 in both directions, you can always hit zoom 6 to get back to a standard negative 10 to 10 viewing window in both the x and y directions. Okay. So to actually find these extreme values, what we want to do is we want to hit second and then trace to go into the calculate menu. Second and a trace. And you'll see a lot of options in here. Many of these we will use later in the year. Some of these you will use when you take AP Calc. The one that we want to focus on right now are the ones 3 with minimum and 4 maximum. Now on these menus, you can always use the up and down button to scroll through a menu, or you can just type in the number that goes with the choice you need. I want to find that maximum point on the left first, so I'll hit the 4 to go to maximum. Now every time you find a max or min, it's going to ask you to enter 3 things to help find it. So the point I'm actually trying to find is right here. And I would guess that it's somewhere around negative 1, 4. So they're asking first for a left bound. They're asking for an x value that appears before the x value I'm looking for. If I think the point that I'm looking for here has an x of about negative 1, maybe I want to type in negative 2 as a left bound. And again, make sure when you type in negative 2 that you use the negative button and not the minus button. Once you've typed in that left bound, hit enter. And you'll kind of see it pop up on the screen there. It's like saying, this is where I'm going to start looking for your maximum point. Now that after you entered a left bound, we want a right bound. So now I want to type in an x value that clearly happens after the point I'm looking for. So it looks like that point is happening at about negative 1. How about I type in 0 for a right bound, an x that happens after that point. And then I'll hit enter again. The third thing it's going to ask for is a guess. Guess where the x is. You don't actually have to do this. You could just hit enter a second time or a third time, and it will find it for you. But I kind of like putting in there what it is. I'll put in negative 1, and I'll hit enter. And check out what happens now. It gives me that maximum point. See the cursor right there saying this is where I'm at? And here are the coordinates. Now, they're not nice x and y values. We're going to have to round to 3 places when we write our answer. How about negative 1.291 and 5.303? So for my maximum, negative 1.291 and 5.303. Now what I want to do next is I want to go find this minimum point here. And it will work the same kind of way. Hit second and trace to get to the calc menu. And this time make sure I choose minimum, not maximum, and hit enter. And I'll do it the same way. I'll enter a left bound, an x that appears to happen before that. I would guess that's maybe 1.5. Maybe I'll type in 0 for my left bound. A right bound, an x that happens after that. Let's go with 2. And what do I think that is? I'll type in like 1.2. We'll see how close I get. That's pretty close. It's 1.291, comma, negative 3.303. And there we've got it. You know, if your function has more than one of these points, you're just going, that's fine. You're just going to need to use this process as many times as necessary to find the points you're looking for. Okay, it's time for you to try this one on your own. Before you try it on your own, you might want to watch the process of how to get that entered back in to the calculator. So if I go back to my y equals menu, you know, I'm done with this function now. I can get rid of all of what's there on y1 by just hitting the clear button. You could actually delete each entry, you know, piece by piece, but if you just hit clear, it will clear out the entire entry on the y1 line. Okay. This function involves an absolute value, and to find the absolute value, I need to hit the math button, and then I need to go over to the number menu with the right arrow, and I want to choose the very first option, ABS. And that will allow me to type in the inside part of this function. I need, in parentheses, and by the way, your parentheses are here, you've got x minus 1, all of that squared. The squared button is right here. So if I just hit that, that will square the input. And then I got minus 3. Why don't you see if you can use that to get the graph? And if you can get the graph, see if you can find the extrema. Let's take a look at the graph here. Oh my, that's interesting. I think I see what would be 2 minimum values and a maximum right about there. Let's see if we can find them. To find the maximum, you could do the order you do these in doesn't matter, right? I'll do the maximum first. It looks like that might be around 1, 3. So maybe I'll type in a left bound of 0. Maybe I'll type in a right bound of 2. And guess that the x is 1. Yeah, sure enough it is. 1, 3. So 1, 3. Now I think that there are 2 minima here. So let's see if we can find them. I think one of them is right about there at around -1. So I'll hit second and calc. I'll choose the minimum this time. And if I think that point over here has an x of -1, maybe I'll type -2 in as my left bound. I'll type 0 in as my right bound, and guess around -1, and see what it gives me. Alright, so it wasn't quite at -1. It was -0.732. Now, you need to know something important here about this E-6. The calculator gives you scientific notation with this capital E. So what they're really saying here is 1.8 times 10 to the -6th power, or 0.0000018. And that's just the error of this. What they're saying is 0. So it is totally okay to write your answer -0.738 comma 0. And let's go find this one over here. That looks like that's around x equals 3. I've got a feeling it's not exactly that. So we'll do a minimum. Maybe I'll type, if I think x is 3, I'll type in my left bound as 2. I'll type my right bound in as 4. And as my guess, I think I'll hit 3. And there it is. It's 2.732, and that's 0 again, isn't it? So another minimum is at 2.732, 0. How'd you do? Okay, this one's for you to try as well. See if you can graph this function, see if you can find the maxima and the minima. Let's take a look at it. So I'll go back to my graphing screen. I'll type in 2 times x minus, the square root is second and then x squared. So hit second and then your x squared button on the left to get the radical. And now you've got inside that radical, you've got x cubed plus 6. Important to make sure that plus 6 gets inside the radical as well. So it should look something like that. Looking at the graph, this is interesting. Now this one has like a firm, like a starting point here. So that's different. That's a little unique. Okay. I do see a maximum point right over here near the x-axis. So let's see if we can find that. Hit second and count. I'm looking for a maximum. What would you guess that is? Maybe x equals 2.5. I'll type in a left bound of 1. I'll type in a right bound of 3, and I'll guess it's at 2. And there are the coordinates of the maximum point, right there. 2.478 and 0.350. 2.478 and 0.350. Okay, now there's something unique about the point right here at the very end of the graph. That can be considered a minimum point because you're not really switching from decreasing to increasing there, but it is the lowest point at the end of the graph. If there were another point going on over here, if this were a piecewise function and something else were going on over here, then I couldn't really call that a minimum point. But at the end point of a graph, at the end point of its domain, we can call it that. But watch what happens if I try and use the minimum feature here. If I choose minimum and say, well, that looks like that's around x equals -2, let me type in -3 for my left bound and -1 for my right bound, and guess that it's -2 or so. Look what happens. It says non-real answer. Essentially, it's not able to find, this process isn't able to find the minimum points at the end of the graph like we want it to. So if I hit quit and go back to my graph, I'm going to have to use an approximation. I'll simply hit the trace button. If you press the trace button, it will let you use the cursor left and right to scroll through the curve and trace along it with a point. See the little flashing point there? So the best I can do with the technology I have is to get as close to that point at the end of the graph as I can, and then record that ordered pair as an approximation. So let me get close, see if I can get even closer. What I want to watch for is to see if the y value disappears. If the y value disappears, we've gone too far. Oh, we're still good there. Let me press it again. Ah, there it is. It's gone. So this point really is too far. This point, if I go back, that's the closest I can get to the end of that with the technology I've got. So that's the point that I'll record. And there it is.